She thought it was just another peaceful day under the sun. No noise, no problems, just her, the pool, and complete stillness. But even the calmest skies can hide a storm ready to break. It was one of those rare afternoons where everything just felt right. The kind of day where time slowed down and nothing, absolutely nothing, needed fixing, rushing, or worrying about. The sun poured over her backyard like honey, warm and golden, painting the surface of the pool with glistening waves. Caroline Daniels, 34, leaned back in her lounge chair, a cold drink in one hand, her favorite playlist humming softly from the Bluetooth speaker nearby. Her phone was on silent, tucked beneath a folded towel, and for once, she didn't care what was happening online. This moment belonged to her, and she intended to make the most of it. Her backyard was her sanctuary, surrounded by tall hedges, flowering vines, and smooth white stones. It was both private and open, a small paradise carved out of suburbia. The water in the pool was perfectly clear, inviting, with just the slightest ripple from the breeze. The scent of jasmine lingered in the air, mixed with a faint smell of sunscreen on her arms. This was a reward she had promised herself for surviving years of pressure, burnout, and a brutal divorce that had nearly broken her spirit. Caroline had worked hard for this home. She wasn't born into luxury, nor did she stumble into money. Every tile in the patio, every plant in the garden, every upgrade to the home was earned through long nights as a freelance graphic designer, countless revisions, missed weekends, and sleepless deadlines. Now, finally, with most of the mess behind her, she could enjoy the peace she'd built brick by brick. She took another sip of her lemonade, the condensation dripping down the glass onto her chest. Her eyes closed behind her sunglasses, soaking in the warmth. She didn't hear any traffic, no dogs barking, no construction, no doorbells. Just wind, water, and the occasional chirp of a bird. Heaven, she thought. This is my heaven. It wasn't just the silence, it was the stillness. A rare kind of stillness that made her feel like time had stopped just for her. She was aware of every breath, every rustling leaf, every brush of air against her skin. There was something healing in that. For the first time in months, she didn't feel like she was running from something or toward anything. She was just present. Caroline dipped her feet into the pool, sighing as the cool water contrasted with the warm sun. She smiled without realizing it. Her dog, Baxter, a sleepy golden retriever, lay curled in the shade nearby, occasionally wagging his tail as if to agree with her mood. Birds fluttered between the trees, and somewhere in the distance, a lawnmower buzzed faintly, just enough to remind her that the world still existed beyond her hedges, but not loud enough to disturb her peace. She glanced at the sky, blue, cloudless, endless. If she had to describe what safety looked like, it would probably look like this sky. Still, she couldn't shake a faint sense of unease that came and went like a passing shadow. Nothing concrete, just a flicker of tension at the edge of her awareness. A squirrel running too fast across the fence. A bird taking off suddenly from the tree. The wind shifting direction. Small, meaningless things. But her instincts, honed by years of dealing with unpredictable clients and life hurdles, noticed them anyway. It was probably nothing. Maybe she just had too much caffeine this morning. Or maybe her brain wasn't used to this level of calm. After all, her life had been anything but quiet for the past 3 years. She reached for her phone, not to check social media, but to snap a photo of the pool and send it to her sister with a caption. Finally, she got a moment to breathe. Heaven looks like this. Before she could hit send, she paused. Something about the photo looked different. Not wrong, exactly, but something had shifted. The angle of the shadows, a shape in the corner, a glint behind the bushes. She frowned and zoomed in, but there was nothing unusual. Just her fence, some leaves, and the water's reflection. Girl, relax, she muttered to herself, tossing the phone gently onto the towel again. Not everything is a Netflix thriller. Still, she couldn't help but glance toward the fence again. Nothing. The breeze picked up slightly, rustling the leaves. She shook off the paranoia and stood up, stretching, her muscles aching from stillness. Maybe it was time for a swim. She dove into the water in one clean, practiced movement and let the coolness wrap around her like a blanket of clarity. Underwater, the world was muted, calm, dreamlike. No phones, no calls, no emails. Just the sound of her own body moving through space. When she surfaced, her hair slicked back and her breath steady. She felt renewed. She pulled herself to the edge, resting her arms on the pool deck, face turned up to the sun. This was what she had fought for. Not money, not status, just this freedom, this peace. And yet, that twitch of unease again. A single loud bang rang out in the distance. Not a gunshot, but something heavy, like a car backfiring or a door slamming too hard. Caroline froze for a second, her heartbeat skipping. Baxter sat up, ears perked. Probably the neighbor's trash bins, she said aloud, more to herself than the dog. He stared toward the fence, low growl in his throat. She narrowed her eyes. There were no footsteps, no voices, no warning, just silence again. Then the siren started, distant but unmistakable, wailing, rising, getting closer. Caroline stood up quickly, wrapping herself in a towel, water dripping from her hair onto the concrete. Her heart began to pound, and not because of the swim. The sirens grew louder. 2, maybe 3 sets. Police? Ambulance? She looked over the fence, but couldn't see anything beyond the trees lining the property. A knot twisted in her stomach. Could it be a neighborhood emergency? A car crash? A fire? Or something closer? She hurried inside, dripping water across the floor as she grabbed her phone. No alerts, no texts, no calls. She opened a local app. Nothing unusual reported. She glanced at her reflection in the sliding glass door, towel-clad, wide-eyed, unsure. Then she heard it, tires crunching on her driveway. Someone was pulling in, multiple vehicles, doors slamming, heavy boots on pavement. She moved slowly to the window, peeking out from behind the curtain, and her blood ran cold. 3 police cars, 1 ambulance, 1 fire truck, all in front of her house. Uniformed officers moving quickly, radios on their shoulders. One pointed toward the backyard. That's when she heard the shout. Police! Step outside with your hands visible. A pause. Then the sound of a woman whispering. Please help me. He's outside. He has a gun. He's gonna kill me. Her voice cracked with terror, almost unintelligible between panic breaths. Static fuzz around the edges of the line, but the location pinged clear. 1247 Willow Crest Lane. That was all it took. Within 30 seconds, the dispatcher had flagged it as a possible domestic violence incident, potential active shooter. The woman on the other end gave only fragments before the line cut off. She was hiding. She couldn't talk long. She said he was still outside, somewhere near the pool. When the dispatcher tried to call back, the line went straight to voicemail. Every second counted. Patrol cars from nearby units were rerouted immediately. EMS was notified. A fire engine was deployed as precaution in case of structural damage or injury. Within 3 minutes, sirens were screaming down Willow Crest, tires screeching, lights cutting through the sleepy calm of the neighborhood. To the dispatcher, it was just another nightmare unfolding in real time. But to the first officers on the scene, it was unclear what exactly they were walking into. A man with a weapon, a possibly injured woman, unknown hostiles. The information was vague, but the GPS didn't lie. Victim possibly in hiding, suspect on premises, threat level red. The lead officer repeated to his team, House is large. Yard is enclosed. We need a clear sweep. And so they moved in, guns drawn, vests on, adrenaline high. At that exact moment, Caroline stood frozen behind her curtain, watching officers flood her driveway like a military unit. Her brain struggled to catch up. There had to be some mistake. This couldn't possibly be for her. Baxter barked sharply behind her, his tail stiff and low. Then another shout. "Ma'am, step out slowly. Hand where we can see them." Caroline hesitated. Her mind screamed questions. Was there someone in her house? Did something happen she hadn't noticed? Why were they calling her out like she was a suspect? She opened the glass door and stepped onto the patio, hands raised slightly, water still dripping from her hair, towel wrapped tightly around her. I live here," she called out. "What's going on?" The officers didn't move any closer. One of them, clearly in command, stayed behind the fence and used the speaker on his vest. "Ma'am, we received a distress call from this location. We need to ensure your safety. Is anyone else in the house with you?" "No, just me and my dog. That's it." "Anyone else on the property? Any visitors today?" "No. I've been alone all day. I don't understand." "Step forward, ma'am. Hands visible." Trembling, she complied, heart thudding so loudly she could barely hear herself speak. Baxter whimpered behind her, confused by the tension in the air. Caroline's mind raced. Was this a mistake? A prank? Or was something happening without her knowing? As she reached the gate, the officer lowered his weapon slightly, but didn't relax. "Your name?" he asked. "Caroline Daniels." He nodded to another officer, who quickly checked her name against the address. "This is her residence," the second officer confirmed. "Title and utilities match." The commanding officer signaled to the rest of the team. "Secure perimeter. Check backyard, windows, possible entry points." Within seconds, 3 officers swept past her and moved through her yard, checking behind hedges, scanning for movement. Caroline turned to follow their gaze, still confused. Her mouth was dry, her pulse erratic. "What happened? Why are you here?" she asked again. There was a 911 call placed from this address. The officer said. A female voice said she was being threatened, said there was a gunman outside. Then the call dropped. Caroline blinked. "What? I didn't call anyone. No one's been here all day." "Are you sure? No deliveries, no friends, no repairmen." "No, nothing. Just me." The officer looked at her for a long moment, then gestured toward the house. "We'll need to do a full sweep. Do we have permission to enter?" Caroline hesitated, her throat tight. "Why, yes. Go ahead." She led them into the house, now dripping pool water onto her hardwood floor. The officers moved carefully, checking closets, behind curtains, under furniture, in the bathroom. They radioed back to confirm. No signs of forced entry, no weapons, no people, nothing. Caroline stood in the living room, arms crossed over a towel, now shaking from more than just the cold. The lead officer returned from the sweep. House is clear. Yard secure. No visible threats. No signs of break-in. She dropped onto the armrest of her couch. "So what does that mean?" He exchanged a glance with his partner. "It means either someone spoofed your address or the call came from someone near your home. But why? Who would do that? That's what we're going to find out." Outside, the other emergency units were beginning to clear. Neighbors stood at the edges of their yards now, curious, whispering. Some recorded with phones. Others just watched in silence. The once peaceful neighborhood had become a spectacle. Caroline's phone buzzed again. 2 missed calls, one from an unknown number, the other from her sister. The officer sat down across from her, notebook in hand. "I'm going to need to ask you a few questions. Have you had any disputes recently? Someone angry with you? Anyone you blocked? Had a falling out with ex's former friends?" "No. I mean, nothing serious. Not that would lead to this." What about online? Arguments on social media, threats in your inbox. She frowned, thinking, just the usual spam. Nothing serious. This doesn't make any sense. Has anyone ever had access to your property? Hidden cameras, smart locks, maybe someone copied your key? I don't think so. I live alone. I keep things locked. The officer scribbled something in his notebook. We'll need access to your phone records. And we may want to check your security cameras if you have any. She pointed to a small black device above the patio door. There's one out back. It records movement. Perfect. Let's review the footage. While an officer retrieved the camera's footage, another checked her phone. There were no outgoing calls to 911, no audio files, no recordings, no trace that she had ever dialed anyone. And yet the location on the 911 log was ironclad, her exact address. The footage from earlier that afternoon was uneventful. Caroline swimming, sitting by the pool, Baxter walking lazily across the patio. No one else appeared on camera. Nothing suspicious. Until, hold on, the officer said, pausing the video. A shadow moved briefly near the outer fence. Quick, low to the ground, barely visible. Then gone. Rewind that. Another officer said. They watched again. The same flicker of movement. Not enough to identify anyone, but enough to prove Caroline wasn't imagining things. There was someone out there, she whispered. I felt it. The officers exchanged a look. You may have been the target of a false emergency call, possibly swatting. Caroline blinked. Swatting? It's when someone reports a fake emergency to send police to your house. It's illegal and extremely dangerous. We've seen it happen to public figures, streamers, even regular citizens. But why me? I don't have enemies. Sometimes it's random. Other times it's personal. Caroline sank into the couch, mind spinning. Someone had used her address. Used her life like a piece on a game board. And it nearly got her shot. Outside, the street still echoed with sirens, though the first wave of emergency vehicles had begun to back off. The red and blue lights spun silently now, casting pulsing shadows against the neat rows of suburban homes lining Willowcrest Lane. The neighborhood had transformed in minutes from calm to chaos, alert, anxious, and buzzing with whispered theories. Down the block, kids stood with their parents on front lawns, eyes wide, ears straining for any hint of drama. Some held smartphones in the air, filming from a distance. Others huddled behind hedges, curious but cautious. In a community like this, quiet, middle class, orderly, nothing ever really happened. And when something finally did, it arrived with flashing lights and unanswered questions. 2 paramedics stood beside the parked ambulance, glancing toward the house as they packed up and used equipment. There had been no injuries, no visible victims, no one to stabilize, resuscitate, or load into the back. That, in itself, raised concern. This doesn't add up, one of them muttered. We got a priority 1 call with gun threat. Whole unit mobilized, and it's just her? The other nodded slowly. Feels wrong. Either she's a great actress, or someone really messed with her. As Caroline sat inside with the officers, trying to piece together what was happening, word had already begun spreading among the neighbors. Some leaned over fences to speak in hushed tones. Others stayed back, eyes narrowed. She always kept to herself. One woman whispered, Single, works from home. I think maybe someone from work got mad. No, I heard she had a stalker once, another neighbor added, lowering his voice. Couple months ago. Cops were here back then, too. Could be related. Someone else chimed in. What if she was hiding someone? They could have jumped the fence and ran before the cops came. Speculation swirled in every direction, none of it helpful. But with no answers from the authorities and no one else to focus on, Caroline had become the center of a narrative that didn't yet make sense. Inside the house, she sat now in dry clothes, though her hand still trembled slightly. An officer handed her a warm mug of tea, which she accepted silently, unsure what to do with it. Her mind reeled with the facts, or lack of them. Someone had used her address to report a violent emergency. That person knew her location, knew how to trigger the system, knew how to disappear. Did the call come from my number? She asked again, her voice quieter this time. The officer shook his head. No, the 911 call came from an unregistered burner phone. No name, no ID. We're still working with dispatch to trace the tower location. So it was fake. We can't confirm that yet. All we know is that the call was placed. The voice sounded female, and she claimed there was an armed man at your property. Caroline frowned. Do you think the voice was real? I mean, someone actually scared. The officer leaned back slightly. It sounded distressed. Could have been real panic or a convincing performance. If it was staged, they were good. Why would someone go through all this just to scare me? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood and glanced through the window, where more of the emergency responders were now retreating. It could be harassment, he said finally, or revenge, or just someone playing God behind a keyboard. These calls aren't always about the target. Sometimes it's just about watching chaos unfold. Caroline shivered, suddenly feeling far more exposed than before. The tall hedges in her backyard no longer felt like protection. They felt like blind spots. The officer's radio buzzed. He stepped away to answer, speaking in low tones. She could make out phrases like tower triangulation and surveillance footage from neighbors. That gave her a flicker of hope. Then another thought struck her. What if this wasn't random? What if it was connected to someone she knew? She stood up, pacing slowly. If it was someone I know, would they have to be close by to spoof my address like that? The officer returned, nodding slightly. Not necessarily. If they knew your address and used a burner, they could have called from a nearby block, then tossed a phone. Or they could have placed a call from miles away and made it look like it was coming from here. Do you think they were watching? He paused. That's what worries me most. Outside, a plainclothes detective arrived on the scene. He walked with purpose, a file in his hand, and immediately approached the lead officer. They spoke in hushed tones before both turned toward the house. Ms. Daniels, the officer said, re-entering, "This is Detective Rowley. He's taking point on the investigation now." The detective nodded politely, but didn't smile. "We're collecting as much digital evidence as we can. In the meantime, we need to look through any recent threats, comments, or messages you might have received online. Anything from the last week, especially the last 24 hours. Caroline handed over her phone. "I don't think there's anything, but go ahead." Rowley pulled on gloves and began scrolling. He wasn't looking for obvious threats. He was trained to spot patterns, tone changes, timing. Comments that seemed too innocent. Messages deleted quickly after sending. Accounts that popped up and vanished. Meanwhile, officers moved around the property again, this time more thoroughly. One of them spotted a faint shoe print near the side gate. Small, narrow, pressed lightly into the damp earth. Another officer found a piece of torn fabric caught on a fence post. It wasn't conclusive, but it proved one thing. Someone had been near the house. They weren't just messing with her. They'd been watching. Back on the street, curiosity had turned to worry. One neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, crossed the road to speak with departing firefighter. "Was there really someone with a gun?" she asked. "No confirmation, ma'am," the firefighter said politely. "False alarm, maybe, but we're treating it seriously." "I hope she's okay," Mrs. Henderson muttered. "She's always been quiet, kept to herself. Poor thing." Behind her, a young teenager muttered to his friend, "Bet she's got something to hide. People like that always do." Inside, Caroline's anxiety was shifting from confusion to fear. The more she understood the mechanics of what happened, the more she realized how vulnerable she was. Her personal information was out there. Her address, her routines, even the layout of her home. Someone had used all of it against her, with precision, Detective Rowley finished skimming her phone and handed it back. "Nothing obvious," he said, "but I'd like to have our cyber unit take a deeper look. You okay with that?" She nodded. "Yes, please." "Also," he added, "I recommend staying somewhere else for a couple nights. Friend, family. Just while we get a handle on this." Caroline looked around her house. The soft pillows, the cozy lighting, the scent of jasmine candles still lingering. It was supposed to be her safe place, but now it felt invaded. "I'll call my sister," she said quietly. "She's close." Rowley gave her a firm nod. "Good. We'll have patrols circle the block overnight, just in case." As the officers began wrapping up their search and logging evidence, Caroline stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. The sirens were gone now. The crowd had dispersed. Only a few curious glances came her way, but the damage was done. A single fake call had sent her world spinning, and whoever had done it wasn't finished yet. The pounding of boots on pavement broke the surreal stillness of the afternoon. Shouts erupted from beyond the gate, sharp commands slicing to the soft rustle of wind in the palms. The woman shot upright in her lounger, her book falling unnoticed to the deck. For a moment, she sat paralyzed, her mind struggling to match the sounds with any logical explanation. Dogs in nearby yards began to bark in a frenzy. She turned toward the house, squinting into the brightness. And then the shouting came again, louder, closer. "Ma'am, step away from the pool. Hands where we can see them." She blinked. Her mouth opened, but no words came. "Hands? Why?" She looked down, half expecting to see something in her grasp. But there was nothing, just a towel draped across her lap and sunscreen by her side. Before she could rise, the side gate burst open. Officers streamed in, weapons drawn. Red and blue lights flickered off their gear, casting surreal colors on the walls and water. One officer's voice boomed again, more urgent this time. "Do not move. Get on the ground. Now!" The tone triggered something deep in her, pure adrenaline. She dropped to her knees instinctively, still too stunned to speak. Her heart pounded so loudly she couldn't hear her own breathing. Somewhere in the chaos, she heard the screech of more tires, more shouting, and the metallic slam of car doors. The scene unfolded like a nightmare, out of sync with reality. She hadn't done anything. What was this? "Who are you?" she tried to ask, her voice shaking, but it was drowned out by a new voice crackling through a radio behind them. "Units 3 and 4 secure the perimeter. Suspect is non-compliant. Be advised, possible injuries on site." Suspect? The word hit her like a slap. Was this real? She slowly raised her hands above her head, tears pricking the corners of her eyes, not out of guilt but confusion. Every instinct told her to comply, but her mind was racing too fast to process. "I live here," she stammered, her voice finally pushing through. "This is my house. What's going on?" But none of the officers responded. Their eyes darted toward corners of the yard, the house, the windows. One of them moved to the side, signaling to another to flank left. It was like she wasn't even there, as if she were part of the background in some operation they'd already scripted. Finally, one officer stepped toward her, voice calmer but eyes still sharp. "Ma'am, stay exactly where you are. Do not move. Do you live here alone?" "Yes," she said, breathless. "What is this?" "We received a 911 call about this location. Possible assault or hostage situation. Are you injured?" "What?" She blinked. "No, I'm not. I don't even. There's no one else here." By now, more officers had entered the property. A paramedic team followed, scanning for signs of injury. The woman watched as they moved past her, uninvited and silent, disappearing into her kitchen through the sliding door she'd left open to feel the breeze. She wanted to scream, or cry, or run. But all she could do was sit there in stunned disbelief, her hands still in the air. A firefighter passed by her, mumbling into a walkie-talkie. No smoke, no visual signs of trauma, no bleeding. Scene calm for now. A female officer finally crouched beside her, speaking with a touch more humanity. "Ma'am, someone called in from this address. Claimed they were being attacked. Claimed the situation was critical. We have to treat that as real." "I've been out here all day," she said, her voice trembling. "By myself. I haven't seen or heard anyone. I don't even have guests." The officer gave a slight nod, as if acknowledging how bizarre the whole thing seemed, but the gears of the emergency response machine were already in motion. The house needed to be cleared, the property searched, reports made. She was asked to stand slowly and was escorted to a shaded part of the yard while teams swept through her home, her sanctuary now treated like a crime scene. She watched in a daze as gloved hands opened her bedroom drawers, peeked under her bed, moved through her hallways. An officer scanned a tablet, presumably pulling up the call transcript or location data. The paramedics, having nothing to treat, waited awkwardly by the fence. "This can't be real," she murmured. "This has to be a mistake." But if it was a mistake, it was a massive one. Her neighbors had begun gathering at the ends of their driveways, some recording on phones, others just staring with wide eyes. The woman felt the heat of humiliation rising along with the summer sun. Would anyone believe her side when all they'd seen were sirens and officers yelling with guns drawn? Another officer emerged from her house, speaking into a mic on his shoulder. No sign of struggle. No blood. No second party. Nothing suspicious. The original officer returned, glancing at her with a more relaxed expression. "Okay, looks like a false alarm, but we need to trace the call. Can you show us your phone, just to confirm it wasn't made from your line?" Still shaking, she fumbled to unlock her phone and handed it over. The officer checked recent outgoing calls, confirmed there was no call to 911, and nodded. "We'll have dispatch run a trace on the call's origin. Could be a spoof number or a call made to divert us here." "Why?" she asked. "Why would anyone do that?" He didn't answer, but the possibility hung heavy in the air. A prank? A targeted harassment? Or something worse? Someone testing her vulnerability? After another 20 minutes of procedural wrap-up and apologies that felt too mechanical, the units began to leave. The flashing lights disappeared down the street. The paramedics offered a half-hearted, "Take care, ma'am," and rolled away. Finally, the last officer gave her a card with a case number and his name scribbled across it. "If anything else happens, anything at all, call us directly. You're safe now."